Good evening. How's everybody doing? My name's Stuart Davis, Flawed Man of God. Welcome to tonight, Wednesday night. And we keep on streaming because we keep on having scripture. Like I said, I'm your host, Stuart Davis, a flawed man of God, a humble parishioner at a small church just outside of Richmond, Virginia. I'm not a pastor, I'm not a biblical scholar. I haven't been to seminary. I'm not trying to get you to join my church or donate to any special cause. What I'm here to do is talk about God, talk about Jesus, talk about the Holy Spirit, talk about the Bible, talk about Christianity, and talk about a wide variety of different topics, issues, and current events, and give you my perspective on them, one that I think is reflective of your average Christian guy. I've been a Christian all my life, 42 years, non denominational Protestant. Don't subscribe to any particular doctrine or denomination. I'm just in the Word daily, trying to do it better each and every day. Sometimes I'll get it right, other times I'll get it wrong, but no matter what, if you're watching this stream, if you're listening to my voice, you can count on getting my honest takes on whatever it is that we're talking about. So if you're somebody who's new to Christianity or just kind of looking for information, you've got a readiness or a willingness to believe, but what's holding you back is doubt, worry, concern about your trust. You know that there's something missing. You think it's Jesus. You want to take the next step, but it is a big step. And while I'll sit here and tell you that it's the greatest step that you'll ever take, the most important decision you can make, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have some trepidation about it. And it's understandable. We live in a world that's going to try to convince you that that's stupid, it's hateful, judgmental to make that decision. And they'll do their best to convince you that it doesn't mean anything. But you know better. Or maybe you're worried that, there's corruption at times in the church. I'm not going to lie to you. We're broken people. Mankind has fallen, and that means that we have a tendency to screw up everything. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's exactly what you're walking into. What you should be doing this for is God. And that should come without concern about what someone else is doing. This is your salvation. And ultimately, you're responsible for that. But I get why that worry can be holding you back. So if you need motivation, if you need encouragement, we'll get that out of the way right now. I believe in you, and I'm rooting for you, and I'm praying for you. And not just me, the folks in this chat, the people watching the stream, they're doing the same. All of Christendom is doing the same. The heavenly host is rooting for you to come to Jesus. And I might not know you because I'm positive I don't. But I know that Christ got on that cross not just for me, but for you as well. You were worth it to him. Now, why we might be unworthy beings, but he found some value and enough value to endure that. And so you should accept that and be able to embrace Christianity, embrace the faith, and enjoy the gifts that come along with it. And we can celebrate those gifts in heaven. And every soul that's saved is a victory. And so knowing that, hopefully, will not make you feel so alone. And yes, there will be times that you'll feel alone, but you're never alone. Never alone. So if that's all you needed, and you got to close this stream and go do whatever it is you were doing, that's fine. I wanted to make sure you left with that at the minimum. But I encourage you to come back or stick around and hang out with us and see what it's all about. For those of you who are already Christians and enjoyed Christian topics and conversation, welcome as well. We run this very similar to a Wednesday night study group or a Sunday school. It's about small group. We are a small group here. And while I'm the host, and while this is a stream that I put together and I schedule, that doesn't mean that I'm the only one with a say. Want you to talk as well. Want to hear from you. I want to know what you're thinking. So be part of the chat. We got a great group of folks who tune in and night out. Make this show better. And oftentimes, we can get caught up in good digressions and discussions based on what you guys and gals come up with and have to say. So if you put something in that comment, again, small stream, easy for me to keep up with it. I promise you I'll read it and react to it. So let me know. What do you agree with or disagree with? Where do you think I'm right? Where do you think I'm wrong? What unique experience, insight, or perspective do you have to offer that maybe we haven't considered yet? Or maybe you just want to add on to something somebody else has said. Share your opinion. Ask questions. I may not have the answers for them. There's a likelihood I won't. But we can at least talk about your question, point you in the right direction, or maybe somebody in the chat will know. With that said, it's Wednesday. How's everybody doing? Had a great way to start off the chat, Dad. Kadarius Toney for choking his girlfriend. It's sad. He joins a long line of domestic violence in sports. Yeah, I know he was arrested. I think he was a free agent because I thought that the Chiefs released him at the beginning of the season, didn't they? Or at some point during the season? I don't know. Kelsey's talking about retirement. I think it's time. I was a very early fan of his coming out of college. His act has worn thin. I don't know if I brought that up on this stream or not, but the fact that it just doesn't seem like he's matured at all, at least when the cameras are on, means I'm ready to move on. Dropping passes. Ugh. All right. We're going to get into Ecclesiastes tonight pretty quick. This may be, I haven't said this in a while, and every time I say this, it ends up not being true, but this may be a short stream because we're doing this one chapter at a time. And this being the middle of the week, there's not a whole lot in the way of small talk to get into. All right. Ecclesiastes 4. We're moving through Ecclesiastes. It's been very dour, humbling, to say the least. But I think that books of the Bible like this obviously are necessary. So often our lives are filled with pride. So often when we fall, it's because of our own hubris. And sometimes we forget that all the things that we are capable of are given to us by God. Sometimes we just flat out forget God. Sometimes we think we can do it on our own. Books like this are a reminder. And it's not here to just sit there and knock you down a peg or two. It's there for you to take comfort in this. Ecclesiastes to me is comforting in that way. Because I do take that vanity of vanities outlook a lot of times, because I'm the one who said, if there is no God, none of this, there's no point to any of this. And I rather would not have existed. Because it means the people around me, people that I love and hold dear, are also dust. People better than me, people who deserve, I feel, deserve a taste of afterlife, won't get it. And whether the universe is billions, trillions, or whatever old, and then it ends, it still means nothing. But what Ecclesiastes does is affirm that. It says, yeah, without God, all this stuff is meaningless. There's no point to it. It's all dust. It sucks. But the good news is God does exist. And so there is purpose behind some of the things that we do. The things that we do for God. We do because of God. There is purpose in our lives. We mean something. But we need to understand that there's a difference between the worldly us and the spiritual us. And at that point, it gets a little bit too metaphysical for me. But I think I get the core concept here, right? Worldliness, that goes beyond just possessions or wealth. It's talking about physical ability. It's talking about a lot of things that are around us that are not part of what God intends for us afterwards. So we need to not hang on to it, and we need to not put so much stock in it, because that stuff is going to fall away. But what we're left with and what we will be gifted by God is much better. So let's get into it. Ecclesiastes 4, the evils of oppression. Reminder that we're using Bible Gateway on here with the Amplified Bible translation. It has become my favorite translation outside of Psalms. Does not do a very good job with Psalms. But it is my favorite translation, introduced to by folks in the chat. So if you want to read along to me, it's awfully quiet tonight. It's another reason why the stream might be short. Evils of oppression. Then I looked again and considered all the acts of oppression that were being practiced under the sun. And behold, I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them. And on the side of their oppressors was power, but they had no one to comfort them. So I congratulated and thought, more fortunate are those who are already dead than the living who are still living. But better off than either of them is the one who has not yet been born, who has not seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. I have seen that every effort in labor and every skill in work comes from man's rivalry with his neighbor. This too is vanity, futility, false pride, and chasing after the wind. The fool folds his hands together and consumes his own flesh, destroying himself by idleness and apathy. One hand full of rest and patience is better than two fists full of labor and chasing after the wind. Then I looked again at vanity under the sun in one of its peculiar forms. There was a certain man without a dependent, having neither a child nor a brother. Yet there was no end to all of his labor. Indeed, his eyes were not satisfied with riches, and he never asked, "For whom do I labor and deprive myself of pleasure?" This too is vanity, a wisp of smoke, self-conceit. Yes, it is a painful effort and an unhappy task. Two are better than one, because they have a more satisfying return for their labor. For if either of them falls, the one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and does not have another to lift him up. Again, if two lie down together, then they keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? And though one can overpower him who is alone, two can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. A poor yet wise youth is better than an old and foolish king, who no longer knows how to receive instruction and counsel, friendly reproof, or warning. For the poor youth has used his wisdom and come out of prison to become king, even though he was born poor in his kingdom. I have seen all the living under the sun join with the second youth, the king's acknowledged successor who replaces him. There is no end to all the people, to all who were before them. Yet those who come later will not be happy with him. Surely, this also is vanity, emptiness, and chasing after the wind. All right. More musings of Solomon. What'd y'all think of that? Serranos and Veritax are here. How's it going, guys? What was that earlier? Nothing new under the sun. Nothing new under the sun. Young Earth creationists on notice. None of it's new or young. Just kidding. All right. He says, then I looked again and considered all the acts of oppression that were being practiced under the sun, and behold, I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them. No one was on the side of the oppressors was power, but they had no one to comfort them. So no one's being comforted. And he's going around and it's like, look, I've observed this. I've seen this. I've seen the power of oppression. I've seen what it does. I've seen these people subjugated, crying out with no one to help them. And even those who were doing the oppressing with their power, still no one to comfort them. But then he thought to himself, the dead are better than the living. The dead are better off. But better off because they don't have to deal with this anymore, right? They've reached their end. They've gone on to their next, to the next place. But better off than either of them is the one who has not yet been born, who has not seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. Right. The innocence, the ignorance of not knowing that this stuff exists. There is a lot of evil in this world. And a lot of evil that was witnessed by Solomon, understood by Solomon, is stuff that goes on in this world that we don't really appreciate here as Americans because we're kind of sheltered from this stuff. But you think of how things go down, how business is done in third world countries or dictatorships, communist nations. It ain't pretty. It's not pretty. And I thought that, Black Hawk Down, for many reasons, is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I think one of the things that they illustrate there was the state of Somalia back then, which is the state of Somalia now. You've got famine on top of that. You've got warlords. You've got anarchy. There is no government. It is insanity. Kids dying of starvation and malnutrition and disease, or being made into child soldiers. And you see how they look at life. And I think some of the commentary there is kind of what you see in some of these places. And that's not even getting into the martyrdom of missionaries and believers in these nations that are that show antipathy for Christianity. And a lot of folks talk about what's going on between Hamas and the Palestinians and Israel. But somebody else brought it up the other day, how the Orthodox Church is being treated by Israel. It's not good. They don't like the Orthodox Church. They'd rather they're not there. They're trying to get rid of them. And on the other side, we got the Palestinians and Hamas. They don't like them either. We're caught in the middle. And that's one of the nicer places to be. And again, it's one of those things where it makes you just go, man, why do people do this? Why does God allow this stuff to happen? And we have to deal with that. But the dead, they're past that already. They've been able to move on. And while that's great, it's better not to have even experienced that at all to begin with. And that's what kind of Solomon's talking about there. Veritex said, pray for your nephew. Dehydration, vomiting in the hospital, negative for appendicitis, gallbladder enlarged, more tests. Yeah, gallbladder surgery. Had a child of a close friend have a gallbladder surgery. Wait, nope, that was appendicitis. No, my wife had her gallbladder taken out. A couple other people I know have had gallbladder surgery. Pretty straightforward, and hopefully they're able to diagnose and treat it. If it's surgery, hope it goes well. It happens. It happens, and hopefully, like I said, it's something pretty benign or routine that's easily rectified. Even if it is something like a appendectomy or whatever the gallbladder equivalent of that is. But you said negative for appendicitis, so it's probably not the appendix. All right. I've seen that every effort in labor and every skill in work comes from a man's rivalry with his neighbor. This too is vanity and chasing after the wind. The fool folds his hand together, consumes his own flesh. One handful of rest and patience is better than 2 fists full of labor and chasing after the wind. This is a confusing few verses here. All right. First part makes sense. Okay. Every effort and labor and skill and work comes from a man's rivalry with his neighbor. I'm working hard because I want to do better than the guy down the street, right? The whole keeping up with the Joneses, wanting to have the prettiest house on the block, the envy of all of your neighbors. We've seen it. You want to be better than the guy after you, right? Stupid. That's not why you're supposed to be. Hold on. Hmm. Um, sorry guys. Um, it's a stupid reason to be pushing yourself. You shouldn't be pushing yourself um because you're trying to outdo someone else. You should be pushing yourself because it's the effort that you're trying to provide for your family and honor God. Your rivalry with your neighbor is not something that you're commanded to have. So why are you worried about that? And on the other side of that, so this is five's really where it kind of gets okay. Five's not six really is the confusing verse. Five is the fool folds his hands together and consumes his own flesh, basically from laziness, right? So you've got the guys working tirelessly to outdo each other, and you got the fool on the other side who's not doing anything. Makes sense. Both are dumb. One handful of, but then six says one handful of rest and patience is better than two fistful of labor and chasing after the wind. And this kind of sounds like a proverb, but it comes out of nowhere, and it doesn't. And I'm missing the context of how it's wrapping up with the other two, because we've just looked at the fool who is foolish because he is resting and not doing anything. And it says one handful of rest and patience. But I think the rest and patience is what works here. It's better than two fists full of labor and chasing after the wind. Is it one? So, and here's the other thing. Am I not? One thing I don't understand here. One handful of rest and patience. So it's one handful of rest and one handful of patience, or is this one handful of both? What does the ESV say? ESV has this in its own part. I saw that all labor and all skillful work is due to one person's jealousy of another. This too is futile in pursuit of the wind. The fool folds his arms and consumes his own flesh. Better one handful with rest than two handfuls with effort and pursuit of the wind. Guess we need to kind of treat six. I want to treat six on its own, but it's paired in here. Let's see if we can get some information here. So it's Ecclesiastes 4:6. Meaning. Ah, okay. Emphasizes the importance of finding contentment and peace in life, even if it means having less in terms of material possessions and worldly success. Balance. Imagine that. Balance. I've said this. I think I've shared this before. I have had opportunities to make a lot more money than I do now, but it meant uprooting my family and taking them somewhere else and basically chasing money. What I have here, where I live, is my family is surrounded by friends and family, connection to church in a good and peaceful area. And that came at the price of more money in my bank account. But I would make that decision each time I've turned that money down. I've made that decision, and will continue to make that decision. And I turned down an opportunity a few months ago because it would have made my life a lot busier. And now's not the time where I need more of that in my life. I need to be focusing on my family, my marriage, and my kids. Focusing on God more than all of that and making sure that I'm doing things the right way. It's not a flex, it's just a decision I made. And if you're ever that is me telling you guys, because it's hard to say no to. If you guys are ever um confronted with an opportunity, a great opportunity to further your career, make more money, all that stuff, just remember there is more to life. There is more to what you do than just how much you make. Think of the peripherals. If you make all the money in the world, but you have no time to enjoy it, how is that an advantage to you? Oh, well, in 15, 20 years, I'll be able to retire. Are you going to make it 20 or 15, 20 years? You don't know. Drop dead of a heart attack. And then what can you say? All is vanity, right? Take that peace. Take that time. It'll help you be a better person. Because in those moments of peace, um, you can pray. You can appreciate what God's given you and count your blessings. You can spend time with your wife and kids. You sit down and relax. Don't work yourself to death. Serrano says, I think you're mostly surrounded by air, and you can have that anywhere. Unless it's India, then it's aerosolized cow pies. Ugh. Or China, when it's just carbon dioxide. It's just smog. All right, continuing on. Then I looked again at vanity under the sun in one of its peculiar forms. There was a certain man with a dependent, having neither child nor brother. Yet there was no end to all of his labor. And indeed, his eyes were not satisfied with riches, and he never asked, for whom do I labor and deprive myself of pleasure? This too is vanity. He spent his whole life working to make something of himself, for reputation, for money. But in the end, because of that, he sacrificed having a family. And he already didn't have a sibling to share all this to share with this stuff in. What did you do it for? What was this all about? And he ends it with, yes, is a painful effort and an unhappy task. And I think that's why the ESV entitles this section of it "The Loneliness of Wealth." There's the loneliness of command, which is, if anybody's ever been in charge of anybody, you understand that you have to make decisions and live with them, and that means making decisions that might be unpopular, but for the good of everybody. That's different from the loneliness of wealth, which the pursuit of can be all-consuming. That's why, and Jesus says, in later on in the Gospels, man cannot serve two masters. Wealth is a tool. It is a means to accomplish other things. If it is your goal, you're messed up. All right. Two are better than one because they have a more satisfying return for their labor. For if either of them falls, the one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and does not have another lift him up. Again, if two lie down together, then they keep warm. But how can that be one be warm alone? And though one can overpower him who is alone, two can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. Again, isolating yourself, trying to be a man apart, the best at what you do, and not sharing in your labor with other people. This is all a pursuit of materialism, things, money. What's going on, Jenny? And where does that leave you? That leaves you vulnerable, leaves you alone. It means outside of whatever you're doing. Well, let's go back a second. With what you're doing, maybe you excel, maybe you're good at what you do, but maybe you get stuck on a task, or maybe what you're doing, you get hurt, you injure yourself. If you're all by yourself, doing it all on your own, carrying the load all by yourself, there's no one there to help you with it. And outside of that, if you've got no one to share with, just like this guy up here in verse 7 and 8, who's there to share that with? Who's there to help protect you? Who's there to help you get through the struggles of life outside of your profession and the grind of your career? God made us social beings. We're not meant to isolate ourselves. Isolation is not good. Now, there might be times where we need to be alone, but that is not the entirety of our life. And our single goal shouldn't be our job. If you remember in Genesis, our labor is a punishment. It's not what God designed us for. It's a reality that it exists and we have to deal with it. And I think you see how bored and destructive people with money who don't labor and just sit around and have it, how destructive they become because they don't have it in their life. But it's not supposed to be the goal. It's a means to an end. And the means shouldn't consume you. It shouldn't isolate you. It should support you. You need to be the master of it and not the other way around. Again, cannot serve two masters. And I'm sure we'll talk about that more when we get to the gospel. All right, last section. A poor yet wise youth is better than an old and foolish king who no longer knows how to receive instruction and counsel. All right, stop here with a footnote. God's word calls on us to make our senior years a time of spiritual maturity and intellectual growth, a time to convert a lifetime of courageous morality, personal integrity, and character building into a legacy that encourages and inspires the next generation. Growth doesn't mean it does not say stagnate. It does not say remain. Spiritual maturity and intellectual growth. And bringing everything we've learned over a lifetime, everything we've learned over a lifetime together. If we don't do that, what good are we? He's talking about the old man, the old foolish king doesn't know how to listen, doesn't know how to take correction, doesn't know how to listen to his peers and his advisors. He's got his mind made up. He's not maturing spiritual, and he's not growing intellectually. And thus a poor kid with intelligence and wisdom is better than him. For the poor youth has used his wisdom and come out of prison to become king. So then it starts to tell a story here, and I wonder if there's more to it than this, if there's some meaning behind what Solomon's talking about here in 14. And basically, I guess this is how you can rise to prominence and power by using your youth and your wisdom to supplant someone who is old and set in their ways and uncompromising in being in correction, won't listen to anybody, stubborn, right? I'm old. I know everything. I know how to do this. Nope. That leaves a man vulnerable to somebody young, willing to try things a little differently and listen to advice. I've seen all the living under the sun join with the second youth, the king's acknowledged successor, who replaces him. There is no end to all the people, to all who were before them, yet those who come later will not be happy with him. Surely this is also vanity, emptiness, and chasing after the wind. It almost sounds like he's talking about It almost sounds like he's prophesying about Rehoboam, his son. But it doesn't line up enough, I think. I could be wrong here, and I could be wrong from the beginning. But I think that's just an elaboration on what he's trying to say here. So, all right. So that's our reading tonight of Ecclesiastes 4. I know you guys have been quiet. This is good. I mean, this is meat. This is why people enjoy Ecclesiastes, because yes, it can seem kind of gloomy, but there's wisdom in here. And to me, reassurance if you look past the initial feelings that you get reading it, or that you may get reading it. You might be smarter than me and figure it out quicker than I do. Not exactly the hardest thing to do. All right, so Jenny, Serranos, Veritax, Thad, that's our chat. That's our chat for tonight. Thank you guys for being here. Middle of the week. Kind of a heavy book that we're running through. But I'm glad you're here. And I'm glad for your words. I appreciate you guys. Keep it up. Serrano says it's good at demonstrating why sins are sins. Yes. What they do to harm you beyond any rule from above. Yeah, and that's really been much of the purpose behind Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. You know, an explanation of God made these laws because, again, I'm going to say, sound like a broken record, but that is fundamental to this. God created the universe. God created the world, the rules in which we exist in, physics, all that stuff. It all is created according to his will. And so he has told us what we need to do in order to live in that system in the way that he wants us to. And that's what we see with the Ten Commandments and other laws established in Israel and during the Exodus. And Proverbs and Ecclesiastes do what Serranos is saying, just reinforcing it. This is telling you the why, giving you examples of, it does make sense. Yeah, it do. Yeah, it do. So, yeah. But thank you guys. Thank you guys for being part of the show. For everybody listening, look, I want, especially on nights like these, it's a perfect time for you to say something and get my attention. But I understand that you might not be able to say anything. You might not want to comment, but I'm glad that you're here nonetheless. I'm glad that you found a stream that you can return to and get something out of. You know, obviously the content is the most valuable thing. But glad you're here. To everybody who is catching this on replay, thank you for watching first. I'm sorry I missed you. I hope to catch you live sometime soon. Everybody have a good night, and God bless.